Okay. The meeting is now streamed on YouTube. Okay. Okay. And then
so where are the participants?
Participants, they're gonna be 2 people enter the waiting.
Participants are fine, waiting room.
Hi, Mishira.
Admit all.
Yeah. Yeah. We're good to go. All right. All
There
good.
we go.
Okay.
And I'm Mark.
Set up.
Good morning, Amy.
Good
Morning.
morning, good morning.
Morning.
Morning. How are you guys?
Mark, you thought for a second it was going to be me, huh? You thought- Mark. That would be okay too.
I was very impressed. I thought Ariel was
No, Mark. It's
Come on,
gonna be-
Ariel.
No. We have Mark here and AB. Oh, Hashem.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Can't take the place of Rabbi Friedman. But we'll do our best. I'm okay. Thank you. Okay. We'll get started. So Rabbi Friedman mentioned you guys are somewhere on Daf Zayin in Sukkah, but he told me to start from a new spot, Daf Tet, and then he'll catch up the rest when he's back. So Daf Tet Amud Aleph, the top of the page, starts with a new Mishnah, new topic. 9a, if you're following along in the English.
9A1.
9a1, yes. Thank you, guys. Okay. Are we sponsored by anybody or just go in? Leilun Shmat Daniel Ben Be'ah. Okay, the Mishnah starts off, Matnitin, Sukkah Yeshana. We're talking about an old Sukkah. What's an old Sukkah? The Mishnah will discuss in a few seconds. Bet Shammai, Poslin. We have machloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, one of the most famous machlokets in all of the Mishnayot. Bet Shammai says no good, the Sukkah Yeshana. Again, we'll see in a second what that means. Bet Hillel, Machshirin. Bet Hillel allows it. Generally, Bet Hillel is more lenient than Bet Shammai. And generally, halakha follows Bet Hillel. Now let's try and understand what this Sukkah Yeshana is, this old Sukkah. There's a lot of famous ones. I'm not sure if this is one that you're remembering or not, but let's go on. Ezehu Sukkah Yeshana. What is an old Sukkah? Kol she'asa'a kodem lahag sheloshim yom. If you made the Sukkah 30 days before the holiday of Sukkot, that's not considered Yeshana. Rashi helps us out over here. At the top of the page, Sukkah Yeshana, he says, Kedem Mefaresh, like the Mishnah goes on and explaining, She'asa'a kodem lahag sheloshim yom velo piresh shehu leshem hag. Not only did he make it more than 30 days before the holiday, but he also didn't specify that the Sukkah that he's making is specifically for the holiday of Sukkot. So according to this, it seems like Rashi would hold if you made the Sukkah in the middle of July or June, the holiday is not until September, so 60 or 90 days before, as long as you specify that you're making it for the purpose of the holiday of Sukkot, it will be okay. Just conceptually, what does it mean making a Sukkah? I think it's just putting the schach on. If you have the walls already, even for more than 30 days before, and then you just put the schach on within the 30 days, you're not in this category of Sukkah Yeshana, and that would be good according to all opinions. One other thing I saw, what's the concept of 30 days? Why is 30 days the cutoff? So we know that anytime you have a holiday coming up, you're supposed to start learning the halachot for that holiday 30 days before. This is also in Rashi, why the next Rashi, Bet Shammai Poslin, right? So if you make it 30 days, anything within that time period of when you're preparing for the holiday, even if you don't have the proper intention when making the Sukkah that it's for the sake of the holiday, it's considered to be, because everything you're doing in those 30 days are already preparing for the holiday just innately. So as long as you're within the 30 days, it's assumed that whatever you're doing is for the holiday. And so it wouldn't be considered a Sukkah Yeshana within 30 days, but before 30 days, Bet Shammai says that is no good. Now he gives you an out also. Aval, back in the Mishnah. Im es asa'a leshem hag, afilu mitihilat hashana keshera. If you made the Sukkah for the purpose of the holiday, you had the intention, and you said when you were making the Sukkah that this will be for the holiday, and again, you did it even from the beginning of the year, So there are several starts for the new year. Presumably, this one is referring to Nisan, which is 6 months before the holiday of Tishrei. As long as, right, if it was Rosh Hashanah, it would be within the 30 days, so it can't be referring to that new year. But if you made it in around Pesach time, made your Sukkah, if you said that this will be good for me for the holiday of Sukkot in September in Tishrei, then it's kasher. Even according to Bet Shammai, this Sukkah would be allowed to sit in. You'll fulfill your mitzvah when you're sitting in it on the holiday of Sukkot in September, October. Good? Gemara. My Ta'ama de Bet Shammai. We're trying to figure out the reasoning of both Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, right? Generally, the Gemara will dissect the Mishnah, and we try and understand why Bet Shammai is saying it's no good if you have a Sukkah. Let me sit in my Sukkah wherever it is, and whenever it was built, and I just have to sit in the Sukkah, right? That's what the Gemara is trying to understand. But Bet Shammai says no good. It has to be within 30 days. Amar Kara, the pasuk tells us, Hag HaSukkot Shiv'at Yamim LaHashem. The pasuk says straight out. If you want the full pasuk, I don't know if all your books have it, but there's an aleph that takes you to the Torah Or HaShalem on the right side of the page. It says in Sefer Vayikra, Daber el Bnei Yisrael lemor b'chamisha asar yom b'chodesh ha-shevi'i hazeh hag ha-sukkot shiv'at yamim l'Adonai. So it gives you the date, the 15th day of the 7th month. That is when you have a 7-day holiday of Sukkot, and the pasuk finishes to Hashem, for Hashem. What does that mean? How does Bet Shammai learn this pasuk? Sukkah ha'asuya l'shem hag ba'inan. You need a sukkah for the purpose of the holiday, because it says La Hashem, it's referring to the holiday. Rashi explains that explanation a little further. Sukkah l'shem hag, right? The first Rashi in the Gemara. Dichtib Sukkot La Hashem l'shem mitzvat hamelech. Right? Again, because it says specifically La Hashem, the understanding is of Bet Shammai is that it has to be for the purpose of the mitzvah. So the Sukkah has to be for the mitzvah, and therefore it has to be within the 30 days, or at least built with intention that it's for the holiday of Sukkot. Okay, so now that we understand Bet Shammai, we're going to have to try and understand what Bet Hillel is doing. So Bet Hillel, this pasuk that we just quoted to support Bet Shammai, Bet Hillel will use this pasuk for a different explanation, and therefore doesn't have to use it for the same reason that Bet Shammai is using it, and he will be able to argue that it doesn't need to be built within 30 days. So what does Bet Hillel use the same pasuk for of Hag HaSukkot Shiv'at Yamim LaHashem? He says, Lekede Rav Sheshat. It follows the explanation of Rav Sheshat. The Amar Rav Sheshat Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Rav Sheshat says in the name of Rabbi Akiva, another learning from this pasuk, Minayin le'atzeh sukkah she'asurim kol shiv'ah. From where do you know that the wood of the sukkah, the Succah again, right, that it's asur to do anything with it for all 7 days, right? You could just sit under it and enjoy the shade of the sukkah and fulfill the mitzvah of the sukkah, but you're not allowed to have any sort of benefit from it, right? Take off the Sukkah and use it for some other personal use. None of that is allowed during the days of the holiday. How do we know that? Rav Sheshat's explaining the name of Rabbi Akiva. Talmud Lomar, he quotes a pasuk, Hag HaSukkot Shiv'at Yamim LaHashem, right? This is the same pasuk that Bet Shammai used, but now Rabbi Akiva is using it for a different purpose to teach us that you can't use the schach of the sukkah for any personal benefit. And therefore, he has a use for this pasuk of La Hashem, the fact that the sukkah has to be strictly for Hashem and not for personal use, and doesn't have to go with Bet Shammai's explanation that La Hashem means it has to be built within 30 days for the purpose of the holiday. The Gemara elaborates on Rabbi Akiva's opinion that was brought out by Rav Sheshat, which again Bet Hillel is collaborating with. And the Gemara says, Vitanya, and they bring another proof from Braita, Rabbi Yehuda ben Batera Omer, Keshem shechal shem shamayim ala hagiga, kach hal shem shamayim al hasukah. So they bring out the explanation that we just spoke about of this pasuk from Rabbi Akiva that he quoted of Hag HaSukkot Shiv'at Yamim LaHashem. They learn from the words Hag HaSukkot that it's together the same way Keshem shechal Shem Shamayim ala Hagigah, the same way Hashem's name or the holiness of Hashem, of the mitzvah, applies on the Hag HaSukkot, the Hagigah, the holiday itself. Kach Hal Shem Shamayim ala Sukkah. So too, when it says HaSukkot, you apply the Shem Shamayim la Hashem to be on the holiday and on the Sukkah, that you can't have it for personal use. What does it mean, the Hagigah, that you can't have it for personal use? Rashi tells us over here, ala Hagigah, Shalmeh Hagigah, right? Obviously, the holiday itself, we enjoy it, but when it comes to the korbanot of the Hagigah, the korbanot of the holiday, the shalamim that were brought, this was for the sake of Hashem and not for personal benefit. Rashi continues, Shem Shamayim Hal Alehem Le'osran, the name of Hashem, there's a holiness to it that's applied on these korbanot, that it can't be used for our personal use, Le'osran, Aj Le'achar Haktarat Imurin, until you finish the process of the entire burning of the fats and other parts of the korban, and then you can use it. But you see a concept of Hashem's holiness applying on the Hag, and therefore also the fact that Pasuk writes the full word Hag HaSukkot in this Pasuk where it's talking about La Hashem. Bet Hillel holds that, according to Rabbi Akiva and according to this other opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Batera, that the Sukkah itself has to be La Hashem, and I can't gain any personal use from the Sukkah during the days of the holiday. Right, if you're moving and you want to disassemble the Sukkah early in the middle of the holiday, are you allowed to? Yes, Bet Hillel is now saying that you can't use it for your personal use, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't disassemble. I'm not sure if it goes that far. There may be a separate halakha that's learned differently about disassembling the Sukkah during. We're going to see actually in a few minutes about assembling a new Sukkah. There's a machloket during Chol Hamoed. Can you, right? Let's say you are moving to Jersey and you want to assemble, you have to do it from before the holiday or during the holiday. That's all going to come up in a few minutes. But that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure if you could disassemble it, but from this pasuk, all we're seeing is that it's asur for personal benefit, and has to be Shivat Yamim Hashem. The Sukkah has to be for Hashem. So if you take it down and you have another one up, I'm not sure. Or does Hashem lose out if you take it down? If you're not going to eat it anyway, I'm not sure. Okay, so now we have one pasuk that they have differing opinions. One, Bet Shammai supports the fact that the Sukkah itself has to be built for the purpose of the holiday. And Bet Hillel uses the pasuk, again, the pasuk is Hag HaSukkot Shevat Yamim LaHashem. Bet Hillel uses the pasuk to tell me that the Sukkah itself is asur for your personal benefit on the holiday. Two opinions on how to understand this pasuk, and therefore we reach the machloket that we discussed in the beginning of the Mishnah, whether a Sukkah Yeshana, a Sukkah that was built more than 30 days before the holiday, if it's kosher or not. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to try and understand why Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel don't use each other's proofs, or why they followed their own logic. So Gemara says in the middle of the page, still on 9a1, they came to the same place. It's a machloket. They used the same. Oh, you're saying the place of the pasuk. The pasuk is the same source. They just learn it differently. Correct. Yeah. Bet Shammai learns the fact that it's Sukkah Yeshana. The Sukkah has to be built for the holiday. So Yeshana, if it's old, no good. If it was built too early, no good, not for the purpose of the holiday. And Bet Hillel learns that once it's built on the holiday itself, I can't use the Sukkah for something else for myself. It has to be La Hashem. Rashi says that. Yes. That's the question, right? That's the Gemara's next question here. Ubet Shammai. Nami mibaya lelahachi. Doesn't Bet Shammai also need this pasuk that we're saying Hag HaSukkot Shevat Yamim Hashem lehachi for this explanation that Bet Hillel was just bringing? The fact that I can't use it for personal use for something else, that has to be strictly the Hashem. Gemara answers, Ina chinami. You're right, Mark. Yeah, Bet Shammai does agree with Bet Hillel on that. So you can't use it. But where do I learn it from? Right, he already used up that first pasuk of Chag HaSukkot Shivat Yamim Hashem. So we need another source. Ela Maita Maihu de Bet Shammai. So now, how do I understand the reasoning of Bet Shammai? He's trying to learn two things, but he's only got one pasuk so far. We need to figure out his explanation, his logic, or his source. Ketiv Kira Harina. He quotes a new pasuk regarding the holiday. This one's written in Sefer Devarim. Chag HaSukkot Ta'aseh Lecha Shivat Yamim. Here the pasuk says proactively you should make a sukkah. Chag HaSukkot Ta'aseh Lecha Shivat Yamim. Again, also for 7 days. This pasuk does not say La Hashem. Right, so we flip Bet Shammai's learning, and we said the first pasuk he agrees with Bet Hillel that Chag HaSukkot Shivat Yamim La Hashem applies to the fact that you can't use the sukkah on the holiday, 7-day holiday, for any other purpose other than for it being for Hashem. You can't use it for personal use. But I have this new pasuk in Devarim. Chag HaSukkot Ta'aseh Lecha Shivat Yamim. What does that refer to? The fact that I have to make for myself a holiday of 7 days. He learns, the Gemara speaks it out, Sukkah ha'asuya l'shem chag ba'inan. Bet Shammai learns that my sukkah has to be built for the purpose of the holiday. From this second pasuk in Sefer Devarim. Right, so again, Rashi will help us out a little bit. Chag HaSukkot Ta'aseh. He understands the pasuk to be Sukkot Ta'aseh lehag. You can read it inverted. Saras HaMikra B'Darsheho. If you invert the pasuk a little bit and move the words around, Sukkot Ta'aseh lehag. The sukkah has to be built, made for the purpose of the holiday itself. And that was Bet Shammai's conclusion in the Mishnah, his original halakha that he taught us. So what's the next question? We'll go back to Bet Hillel. Bet Hillel, now they have two pesukim. How come he doesn't learn the same thing as Bet Shammai? What does he use the second pasuk for? Good. Bet Hillel, ahu mibayele le'osin sukkah bechulo shel moed. Right. So people were looking ahead and saw this, whether or not you're allowed to build a sukkah during Chol Moed. Bet Hillel uses this pasuk, the second pasuk that we just quoted from Devarim, Chag HaSukkot Ta'aseh Lecha Shivat Yamim. Bet Hillel says, I need this pasuk for a different teaching, to teach me that I am allowed to make a sukkah in the middle of Chol Moed. How does he learn it out of this pasuk? Ta'aseh, you should make for yourself a sukkah, and it finishes off Shivat Yamim. I have 7 days to make the sukkah. If for whatever reason I didn't make the sukkah in the beginning of the holiday, before the holiday started, I have 7 days to make it, even during the holiday. On Yom Tov itself, you're not allowed to, because you're not allowed to be boneh. Boneh is one of the isurim on Shabbat and Yom Tov. But on Chol Moed, that isur wouldn't apply. And according to Bet Hillel, it's a mitzvah to make the sukkah even during the holiday, because the pasuk says Ta'aseh Shivat Yamim. I guess this would also apply if you built a sukkah before the holiday, and you're moving and you need to build another sukkah, and you didn't get to Jersey from before the holiday. You can do the second half for Chol Moed, and the second half you can build. Yeah. Take down, we still didn't figure out the answer to. The next page has the opposite. You can't build a sukkah on Chol Moed. Well, we're going to learn Bet Shammai now, and let's see what Bet Shammai has to say. Right. So now where do we stand in the Gemara? We have two pesukim. The first pasuk says, pasuk in Vayikra, Daber B'nei Yisrael Lemor b'chamisha asar yom hachodesh hashiv'i hazeh Chag HaSukkot Shivat Yamim LaHashem. It doesn't talk about ta'aseh. It doesn't have the proactive action of building the sukkah. Just the concept of the holiday, the Chag and the sukkah have to be LaHashem. Right? It has both words in there. Chag HaSukkot LaHashem. The holiday itself, we learned by the korbanot. Rashi helped us out there. The korbanot belong to Hashem, at least for a portion of the time. The sukkah itself belongs to Hashem. I can't use it for any other purpose. That everybody agrees. Bet Shammai, Bet Hillel, they learned the same thing out of it. According to where we are right now in the Gemara, everyone agrees that I can't use the sukkah, the schach, for personal use. Comes pasuk number 2 in Devarim, Chag HaSukkot Ta'aseh Lecha Shivat Yamim, and here is where Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel differ. Bet Shammai learns this pasuk again to tell us that it has to be Ta'aseh, have to be built it. The Shema Chag, Chag HaSukkot Ta'aseh, you can invert the words. Sukkot ta'aseh lehag. The sukkah has to be built for the purpose of the hag. It has to be anew within 30 days sukkah for this, or earlier, but as long as it's for the sake of the holiday of Sukkot. And Bet Hillel says, no, we learn this pasuk, Hag Sukkot ta'aseh lecha shiv'at yamim. I have 7 days to build my sukkah, so I can build my sukkah during Chol Moed. So now again, presumably, like Ralph was saying, if Bet Shammai doesn't learn this concept that I can build it on Chol Moed from this pasuk, either he would need another pasuk to teach it to me, or he would hold that you're not allowed to build a sukkah on Chol Moed. So, Bet Shammai svira lehu. Turn the page on the if you have the English. Kerebi Eliezer. Bet Shammai holds according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. De Amar en osin sukkah bechula shel moed. So he argues on Bet Hillel. You're not allowed, according to Bet Shammai, you're not allowed to make a sukkah on Chol Moed, and that's not a problem anymore because his pasuk was used for something else. His pasuk was to teach me sukkah yeshana, and old sukkah is no good. And Bet Hillel never used that pasuk for sukkah yeshana, so he holds you're allowed to make it on Chol Moed, but a sukkah yeshana could be okay. I built my sukkah whenever I built it throughout the year, even if I have it from last year, it's still kosher for the holiday of Sukkot. Right? This is applicable, I guess, if people that have built in their houses, in their backyards, they have the walls, and they just put up a schach. Sometimes they leave the schach there. You know, according to Bet Hillel, it would be kosher to leave the schach there, have a sukkah year round. Okay, so again, Bet Shammai followed the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, which we saw that we're not allowed to build a sukkah on Chol Moed. And our general halacha, I didn't open up the halacha book, so don't quote me on this, but presumably, since we follow Bet Hillel almost always, when it comes to machloket Bet Hillel Bet Shammai, you would be allowed to build a sukkah on Chol Moed practically. Okay, Bet Hillel late lehu de Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Now we're going to quote something from Rav Yehuda Amar Rav that we just saw that there's a machloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. Bet Shammai holds one thing, Bet Hillel holds another thing. And the fact that Bet Hillel doesn't hold his way, that Sukkah Yeshana is kosher, must be he doesn't hold like Rabbi Eliezer, but he's also not going to hold like this statement that we're about to mention of Rav Yehuda that says in the name of Rav. What does Rav Yehuda say? The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Asa'a min hakosin, umin hanimin, umin hagiredin, pesula. Now we're not talking about Sukkot anymore. We're talking about the mitzvah of tzitzit. If you make your tzitzit, and we're going to bring it back to Sukkah, so just go with this tangent for a little. If you make the tzitzit from kotzin, nimin, or giradin, these are different types of threads that were already made before you were doing it for the sake of the mitzvah of tzitzit. Right? Someone was sewing or weaving something, and they put all these threads together, and now it's in the form of strings. Right? They look like tzitzit. Can I just attach them to my four-cornered shirt, beged, and use it as tzitzit? Right? According to Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, pesula, right? Asa'a min hakotin, min hanimin, or min hageridin, pesula. If you do all of these that were already made threads of strings, you cannot use this for the beged that you have that you need to put tzitzit on it. But if it's min hasisin keshera, but a different type of thread that is less finished of a product, right? Here the English says from balls of thread, right? So it's not necessarily they formed it in the name of CC, but the threads are in a way that it was completed, right? Till you get to the material, it was, yeah.
The weave on the wall is made specifically for tzitzit.
Must be. That's why Rav is holding that specifically one of these types of finished products is okay for tzitzit because presumably it was already made in a way where you had that intention, right? So Rashi says pisula. Why were the first three types of fringes pasul for tzitzit? Rashi more in the middle of the page. On the Hebrew page, right? Because they already stand as a finished product on the clothing. It wasn't made for the sake of the tzitzit to be attached for the mitzvah, but it was for, right, they're hanging it maybe for whatever other reason to have these threads. Then it's pasul to use as tzitzit. But from the sisin, the other type with the balls of threads, that one we said, according to Rav, is kasher to use for tzitzit. So now, if we were to apply this to sukkah, what would we think? Something that's already a finished product, already made for some other purpose other than the mitzvah, the same way by tzitzit, it's no good. By sukkah, it's no good. Who holds that way? Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel? Bet Shammai. Bet Shammai said if the sukkah was already built for no specific reason, more than 30 days before the holiday, we assume it's not for the sake of the holiday. You can't use it for the mitzvah of the sukkah. Same way, if the tzitzit were already made some other way, not for the sake of the tzitzit of the mitzvah, I can't consider it kosher for tzitzit. It's not good for the mitzvah. So therefore, because Bet Hillel doesn't hold according to the opinion that sukkah yeshana is pasul, he would also presumably hold that by tzitzit it's not pasul, right? Bet Shammai would hold it's pasul, but Bet Hillel should say it's kosher. Good. Yeah, presumably that would have to be, yeah. Correct, yeah. There's a lot of other halachot with tzitzit to make it pasul kasher, so those all have to fit the criteria, yes. But it could also be that you're using these thorn-like threads, which are the kotzin, and saying it's no good because, right, there's a note 14 on the bottom of the page. When a thread of the warp snaps, the weaver simply knots the loose ends and continues weaving. The knot eventually protrudes as a thorn from the finished cloth. The Rav teaches that if the knot ends hang near the corner of the garment, they may not be counted as a tzitzit. So even just the knot, right? And I want to grow from the knot and now form it into tzitzit. That first knot is no good, even though it's hanging from the corner of the tzitzit. No good. Like it would be the first step to make the rest of the tzitzit from it. That's no good because it was already there before, and I was just tying it for the sake of it looking better. It broke, and I was fixing it. It wasn't yet tzitzit, and now can I grow it into tzitzit? No, because that first step it had to be l'shem tzitzit. So that.
The way you make these, I can't even not thread.
Yes, but even if it was on the garment from beforehand, right? Just that first knot. Yes. Yeah, on the tzitzit, right, which is attached to the beged. Yeah. Okay, so it comes out that Amar Rav Yehuda quoted this from tzitzit in the name of Rav to teach us that if something was made not for the sake of the mitzvah, then for tzitzit it's pasul. So presumably also Bet Hillel doesn't follow this, right? Now, why are they comparing sukkah to tzitzit? There's so many other mitzvot. Right, certain mitzvot also, right? You can build something not for the sake of the mitzvah, and it would be kasher even according to Bet Shammai. So the fact that the Gemara is comparing sukkah to tzitzit, we have to understand why they're making this connection. So there's a thought process going on that it is similar. So let's see it in the Gemara. Before that, right? So Rav allowed the last type, min hasisin, which was the balls of threads. Ki amrita kameh de Shmuel, when Rav Yehuda said it, right? Rav and Shmuel also have famous arguments throughout the Gemara. They lived at the same time. So Amar Rav Yehuda said this halakha in the name of Rav. When he then said it in front of Shmuel, who lived in a different city, Amar li, Shmuel answered back to Rav Yehuda, af min hasisin nami pisula. Even the balls of thread are pasul, so even stricter. So again, it still comes out from here that the tzitzit that were not made for the sake of the mitzvah of tzitzit, it's pasul. According to Shmuel, it's even more pasul in more scenarios. And the Gemara concludes from the statement, Alma de ba'inan tavya lishma, comes out from here that you need the threading for the sake of the mitzvah. Achanami nibaye sukkah asuya lishma. Presumably, also by our case of sukkah, we should need it for the sake of the mitzvah. Right? So, and because Beit Shammai says pasul, Beit Shammai makes sense that by tzitzit also he would agree. But Beit Hillel, who said Sukkah Yeshana is kasher, when it comes to tzitzit, does he not hold like this opinion of Rav and Shmuel? Rav and Shmuel come after Beit Hillel, right? But it's still, curious to us why Rav and Shmuel will hold one way in tzitzit if it's against Beit Hillel in Sukkah if we're comparing the two. So the Gemara solves this issue. No, we have Rav and Shmuel's opinion. Rav and Shmuel come later, but if they knew that Beit Hillel would hold that it's kasher, then they would also say kasher. Yeah, Rav and Shmuel are later generations Amoraim. Generally, you don't like to see Amoraim arguing on. We only see it by Sukkah, and we're presumably equating it to tzitzit, right? And the Gemara now is going to tell us why they're not equal, right? So at this stage, the Gemara thinks that they are equal, Sukkah and tzitzit, but now Shani Hatam, they're different. Sukkah and tzitzit are different. So what Beit Hillel holds by Sukkah, he's not going to hold it by tzitzit because it's a different scenario. The Amar Kra Gedilim Ta'aseh Lecha Lecha Leshem Chovach. The pasuk by tzitzit says Gedilim Ta'aseh Lecha. I have to make it for you, Lecha, for your own sake. What's your own sake? For your mitzvah. The pasuk by tzitzit has this word of Lecha, but if you were paying attention earlier, Hachanami, the pasuk by Sukkah also says Haga Sukkot Ta'aseh Lecha. So really, that difference is not a difference, right? It has the word Lecha both by Sukkah, both by tzitzit. I have to make it for my obligation. It has to be with intention. Presumably, if I understand the same way of the pasuk by tzitzit, Lecha for the intention of the mitzvah, Lecha by the Sukkah, Haga Sukkot Ta'aseh Lecha should also be for the sake of the mitzvah. And why would there be a difference from Sukkah, which Beit Hillel says is Keshera, to tzitzit, which Rav and Shmuel say is pasul if it's not for the sake of the mitzvah? So the Gemara answers, Hahu mibayele lim'ute gezula. There's a lecha by tzitzit, yes. There's a lecha by Sukkah, also yes. But they're not equal in the explanation of what we learn from this word lecha. By tzitzit, gedilim ta'aseh lecha, we learn that it's for the sake of your mitzvah. So it has to be with the intention of making tzitzit. By Sukkah, the word lecha is lim'ute gezula, to tell me that the Sukkah has to be mine. I can't go and steal and take over someone else's Sukkah. Remember, we have that rule also by lulav and etrog. The pasuk says ukachtem lachem, the same word, lachem, lecha, plural. Right? You're going to learn it later in the Gemara. I think the third perek, lulav agazul. If you have a stolen lulav, not good. If you have a stolen sukkah, not good. So from the word lecha, I learned sukkah can't be stolen, but if it's made for the sake of something else and I use it for sukkah, that would be okay according to Beit Hillel. But by tzitzit, they learned lecha to tell me that I can't use it for I have to make the tzitzit for the sake of the mitzvah. It's a good question. I had the same question. It uses the word lecha, not necessarily. Yeah, it uses the word lecha for tzitzit, not to teach you that it can't be stolen, but to teach you that it has to be built, it has to be threaded for the sake of the mitzvah. So here, the Gemara has this question. Hatem nami, also by tzitzit, it should also be understood for the sake of gezulah. Let's just finish the last line on the page. Hatam ketiv kara harina ve'asu lahem mishelahem. I have another pasuk by tzitzit to teach me that it can't be for stolen. So the lecha doesn't have to be used for the stealing of the tzitzit. That's the pasuk ve'asu lahem, which we read every day in Shema. Ve'asu lahem tzitzit has to be made for yourselves, can't be stolen. So by Tzitzit, I have two Pesukim.
But that means go back to unfinished.
Now we're all back in square one where it's good. By Sukkah, I only have one pasuk, Chag HaSukkot Aseh Lecha, to teach me it can be made whenever.
You have that attention somehow.
Yeah,
No, the one that said that you can't take the stolen one. They had lecha in both places.
the Sukkah can't be stolen.
Right. So now what are we doing with where he used that, it can't be stolen, what are you gonna use that for now? If neither one could be stolen. You understand my
Tzitzit
question?
has two Pesukim. One to tell me it can't be stolen, one to tell me it has to be for the sake of the mitzvah. By Sukkah, I only have one pasuk of Lecha. And that's for the stolen aspect. So therefore, Bet Hillel can say Sukkah
It's not. for the
can
sake
be
of-
made
right.
even not for the
Right.
sake of God.
So the Sukkah doesn't have the Lishma standard?
According to Bet Hillel, no. Because Lecha was built, the Lecha was used for a different explanation that it can't be stolen. Yeah,
Only Tzitzit has to be Lishma.
of the two, Sukkah and Tzitzit, yes, yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Or according to Bet Hillel's understanding of the Sukkah, it has to be Lishma. Right, but we don't follow that. Yeah. Okay,
Thank you
continue tomorrow. Thank you very much.
much.